Hi guys, and welcome back. FODMAP Freedom is enrolling this week only, and I wanted to take a minute to answer some of your questions about the course. But before we get into the meat and potatoes, food pun intended, of this video, I wanted to let you know if you have other questions that were not answered in this video or on the page down below, you can actually scroll down to the bottom of that URL down near the FAQ section, and you could book a call to speak with a FODMAP Freedom coach today, and they will be more than happy to answer your questions. This is a nutritionist who's worked side by side with me for a number of years. She's gone through FODMAP Freedom herself. She has helped me coach students before. She knows this course like the back of her hand, and she would be able to help you understand whether or not this is going to be a good fit for you or whether you would benefit from this course in some way. So that being said, let's get into your questions about FODMAP Freedom in 90 days. The first of which that I get quite a lot of is, I have IBS, but I don't necessarily know if I have SIBO. Would this still be helpful for me if I don't necessarily have SIBO? And the answer is absolutely, it would be helpful for you. When I designed FODMAP Freedom and when I named it, I did have in mind people who have SIBO and they're trying to starve the SIBO with a low FODMAP diet or a SIBO diet. And I also had in mind people with irritable bowel syndrome who get put on the low FODMAP diet, and they may or may not really know if they have SIBO, but low FODMAP seems to help mitigate their symptoms. But that doesn't mean that those are the only people who would benefit from this. And that segues into our next question from Leslie, who asked, is this course only for people with IBS, or would it be helpful for people with IBD? And the answer is absolutely it can be. The things to know is, A, we've actually had a number of people go through FODMAP Freedom who have either Crohn's or colitis, and they have seen tremendous benefit from this program. And I think that it's for one of two reasons. A, keep in mind that people with Crohn's and colitis have a much higher predilection of or prevalence of SIBO compared to the general population. So if you have Crohn's or colitis, there's a higher chance that you have SIBO compared to the average person. So that's an automatic yes for FODMAP Freedom helping you. The other thing is that a lot of this stuff is really foundational for gut health in general. You don't necessarily need a diagnosis of SIBO to benefit from increasing your vagal tone. You don't need a diagnosis of IBS to benefit from working on your dysbiosis or inhibiting candida that is overgrown. So a lot of this stuff is broadly applicable against many different diagnoses, including IBD. And I would say that a lot of people with IBD, in fact, do have SIBO. So for both reasons, yes, we've had people go through the program with IBD and they have had tremendous benefit from that. Barb asked, what if I am not on the low FODMAP diet? I've gotten that question before too. And honestly, part of it is that I just like the name FODMAP Freedom. I thought it was so cute. But I have had plenty of people go through the course who are not necessarily on low FODMAP. Again, really, the crux of it is that this is a IBS and SIBO master course, DIY treatment course, whatever you want to call it. But if you are on the low FODMAP diet and you no longer wish to do that diet and you want to reintroduce things like avocado and butternut squash and onion and garlic, then I have stuff peppered in the course to help you with that process, but it's not explicitly focused on reintroducing the FODMAPs the whole way through. We have that in there for people who need that piece, but it's not the main focus of the course, despite its cute name. All right. Jill asked, would this be helpful for somebody who has SIFO? Absolutely, we do cover candida. Keep in mind that SIFO is very speculative for most of us. We can't really diagnose it aside from a research laboratory type setting. But if you suspect that you have SIFO, which an awful lot of you probably do, or if you have candida overgrowth, yes, we do cover candida amongst other flavors of dysbiosis in this course, and it would absolutely be helpful for you. Virginia asks, I feel as though I have underlying issues such as histamine intolerance and hormone imbalance. Can this program still help me? Yes, absolutely. Again, for a couple reasons. One is that the course does have that material in it. So there's a whole week where we talk about pretty much nothing but histamine and mast cells. There's a whole other week where we talk about pretty much nothing but hormones. And then there's a lot of overlap with other courses, like we talk about hormones quite a lot in the detox module, as an example. But the bigger thing is that I intentionally put those more high-end complex topics further back in the course Because what ends up happening is as you go through the first handful of modules, tackling things like vagal tone and nutrition and nutritional deficiencies and your microbiome, by the time you get to the mast cell part of the course or the hormone part of the course, you're probably going to realize that you don't need to treat them nearly as aggressively as you would have thought. Versus if you just jump into the histamine intolerant part of the course right out the get-go, you might be really tempted to take 10 different antihistamine herbs and cut out 20 different high histamine foods. But again, if we set that foundation and we start treating from a holistic perspective with the material early on in the course, by the time we get to things like histamine and hormones and detoxification, you're going to see that you don't actually have as much work to do in that arena as you might have otherwise thought. So yes, so we can absolutely help with that, but there is a rhyme and a reason to why we structure it that way. Jill asks, do you address biofilms in the program? Not explicitly. So I don't think, it depends what you're going for. So yes, we do use some biofilm disrupting compounds throughout the course. Ginger's a great example. Ginger is a biofilm disruptor in a lot of ways. Garlic can be a biofilm disruptor. Occasionally I will recommend things like bismuth or alpha lipoic acid or lactoferrin. So those do come up in the course. They're not a mainstay, and I don't have any material specifically talking about biofilms though. So if you're looking for like a deep dive into the biofilm conversation, that's not going to be something in FODMAP Freedom, but we do like lightly touch on it here and there, and we do use some of those strategies. It's just we're not really hyper focused on the biofilm thing. Let's see. Judith asks, will we need to buy supplements as we go through the course in order to see results? If so, how much are we looking at? Totally valid question, but I do not know. I would say, well, there's two questions there. Yes, there will be some degree of supplement or herb supplementation that you're going to want to be on throughout the course of FODMAP Freedom. That is one of the things that I use to help people get better. That being said, I know that pill fatigue is a real thing, and I understand that these things cost money. Some of them are very, very expensive. So I take that very seriously when I recommend supplements to people. And I try really hard to not inundate you with 8 million different supplements. I try to just keep it to what actually would be helpful. And when we can, I really like to find 2-fers and 3-fers. So one supplement that's doing 2 or 3 different things for you and impacting multiple areas of your physiology. So yes to supplements. How much you would spend on them, I truly don't know. I'm sorry. It depends on the case. And it also depends like how severely unwell you are and how long you've been sick. A person who just got diagnosed with SIBO a month ago and they've had IBS for 1 year, that's going to be a totally different situation than somebody who's never had a good poop in their entire life. So depends on the person. Katie asks, this program looks great. It is. My only reservation is wanting to get some relief sooner with the treatment rather than waiting weeks to go by before figuring out what to do. Any suggestions? Oh, I want to give her a hug. Katie, if you're listening, I'm giving you a virtual hug right now. So, I totally get why you want to feel better ASAP. I would say though, it's not to say that you're going to make zero symptomatic progress in the first couple weeks of FODMAP Freedom. A lot of people do start feeling better within a couple weeks of the course. It's just that we're trying to go in order, and we're trying to do things in a way that gets you the most long-term symptomatic benefit rather than quick band-aids. If this was a course built for quick band-aids, we would have the antimicrobials right in week 1, and maybe prokinetics would be a close number 2. And that would be the main focus of the course, is just killing the SIBO and priming motility with prokinetics. End of course. But that's not what you're here for. That's not why you're watching this video. That the whole point of FODMAP Freedom is that you want to be rid of your IBS or rid of your SIBO for the rest of your life, and you want to just eat the damn onion and garlic and not think about it and not worry whether or not you're going to be running to the bathroom. So yes and no. Like, I think that a lot of people can expect to feel improvement within the first few weeks. It's not that I'm just going to say be patient until week 12, but there is some degree of like I do ask you to be patient because we're in this for long-term healing, not necessarily quick Band-Aid symptomatic improvement. But I have a lot of sympathy for where Katie's at, and I can imagine where she's at. Moving on though, Mary asked, let's see, if I take this course, will I also need to do labs or stool tests to make it personalized? Yes and no. That's not something that I require in FODMAP Freedom. It's not like part of the curriculum intrinsically. What I try to do is I try to help people understand what is highly likely, kind of likely, and like super unlikely to be impacting your body. If you go through the quizzes and the self-assessments and the Q&As and you realize that you have like every single symptom of hypothyroidism, I would definitely recommend you get TSH, T4, T3, a couple of things checked. And I give you the tools to be able to interpret your lab results and understand what they mean and take action on them if necessary. But similarly, if you go through the quiz and you realize that you have none of the symptoms of hypothyroidism and you're kind of like, do I need to get a thyroid panel done? That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help you understand, yes, this is pretty likely for you. Go ahead and get it tested. Or, this sounds really unlikely. I would focus your time and money and effort on other things. So sometimes people find the need to do some testing. Not always. It depends on the person. And for all that I really like stool testing, I don't use it on everybody. Keep in mind that about 50% of the microbes in the human GI tract, we don't even have a name for them, let alone research documenting whether they're good or bad or in between or what metabolites they make. So stool testing feels very scientific. It feels like it's giving us all the answers and it's really like hard objective truth, but it's really not. A stool test that's looking at like 20, 30 microbes and there's thousands more that we don't have a name for or any research on, like it's not necessary for everybody's healing journey. I guess I'll say that. Next up, Lisa asked, why do you think your program works when working with other integrative/functional doctors has been unsuccessful for so many of us? That's a good question. That's to the point. That is like brutally honest, Lisa. I appreciate that. Couplefold. And I'm going to try to answer this without sounding like an egomaniac. Because I could stand here and I could say, because I'm the smartest of the smarties, but like, that's not useful for you. And I could say, that just my course is amazing. But I think that the truthful answer, I think that, God, this is a really tough one. I think for one, having been through the hell that is IBS, and yet like looking back, I think I had SIBO. Going through that myself, I have a lot of empathy for the people that I'm working with, and I really try to keep it super down to earth, super practical. I'm not going to bullshit you, and I try to be gentle whenever I can, in the sense of like, I'm going to try really hard to not make this stressful or traumatizing if it doesn't need to be, right? Like sometimes there are moments in our health journey where we need to say, suck it up, buttercup, and just do something when it's difficult. But I think a lot of people in the IBS and SIBO world are deeply, deeply traumatized and stressed out. And I don't want to contribute to that stress. I've been there. I remember vividly what it was like cutting out bunches of foods and having a no list and taking a million gazillion different supplements and spending all this money on supplements and feeling like I would never get better. So I think that for one, just I've been there, and that can help to have a guide who's gone through this crap before, pun intended, not intended, but the pun, I'm going to acknowledge it after the fact. I think also like I'm giving you a lot of tools, but I'm also giving you the correct sequence and the instructions of how to use them. So the best analogy I can wrap my head around here is that let's say you go to the store and you go to Home Depot and you buy wood and screws and drywall and shingles and a door and maybe some bricks and a hammer and a screwdriver, and you bring it all home and you're like, I'm going to build a house. If you don't have the instructions and you have no experience making a house, you're probably going to end up with a really ugly house, and it's probably not going to be super strong and functional. But if you have those same exact tools and you either have a blueprint with step-by-step instructions of, okay, you need to do this one first, then this, then this, then this, or if you have somebody there who's built 500 houses in their career and they're standing there looking over you the entire step of the way, like, okay, nope, put the hammer down, you need the screwdriver. Nope, get the shingles out, now it's time for the shingles. One or both of those is so much different than just having the tools. And I feel like, unfortunately, certainly YouTube and Instagram and the internet is just going to give you the tools, but they're not going to give you any instructions. And I know that my channel's guilty of this too, but I'm just trying to get it out there for people in whatever way I can. FODMAP Freedom allows me to work on your case more closely and help you understand what tools you need in a way that YouTube just simply does not. I also have found, unfortunately, that a lot of functional integrative doctors, they have a lot of the right tools, but for whatever reason, they're not taking the time to really listen to their patients the way that they could, and they're just kind of like, bleh, and regurgitating and throwing the tools at you. And a really good example is when somebody gets diagnosed with SIBO, they are just thrown on the low FODMAP diet or a starvation diet and maybe a handful of supplements, and then they're sent home. It's actually not that much different than the conventional medical world in a lot of ways. I mean, we criticize them all day for the 5-minute doctor appointment and the quick, easy prescription, but the same thing does happen in functional medicine, unfortunately. And I really try not to do that, especially in FODMAP Freedom. So those are the best answers I could give for Lisa's question without sounding like a total egomaniac. But yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for where she's at, though, because it sounds like she's worked with a lot of people and it hasn't helped her. Let's see. Paige asked, who should not take your course? Are there any comorbidities that you would recommend against taking the class? So first of all, I bet Paige is in the medical community, because the fact that she used the word comorbidities is a dead giveaway that she's a medical professional in some way, shape, or form. It's a great question, though. The only group of people who I would say really should not take FODMAP Freedom is if you have active, current cancer and you're treating it. There's so much minute detail and intricacy and complicated shit with treating cancer. And I would hate for me to recommend an herb or a supplement for the sake of healing your gut, and then later find out that it affected the efficacy of your chemo or the radiation, or it interfered with it in such a way that you got more side effects, or heaven forbid, we make your oncologist mad. So I would say active current cancer or cancer that you're treating, do not take FODMAP Freedom. If you had cancer in the past and it's in remission, that's a different story. I think you would be fine taking FODMAP Freedom. But if you have cancer currently and it's active and it's doing bad things and you're trying to manage that, please focus on the cancer first, and then maybe you could circle back to FODMAP Freedom later. Let's see. Rachel asks, how much of a time commitment per week should we plan on for the course? So that depends what you want to get out of it. At the bare minimum, I would say the lecture material, like the pre-recorded material, is about an hour each week. You could do that sitting at your computer. You could do that on your smartphone. There's actually an app that you can download and you could watch all the lecture material on your phone. You could even download the MP3s and you could just listen to the audio file. So if you want to take me when you go for a walk, or if you're driving, or if you're on a trip or on an airplane, you could actually do it that way. But give or take, it's about a week of lecture material each of the 12 weeks. And then if you choose to do the Q&As, which I hope that each of you do, because they're really fantastic. If you do the Q&As, then that's going to be anywhere from an hour to 4 hours, depending if you're staying for the whole thing and like what you want to get out of that. The length of the Q&As really depends on the size of the group that we have. In the spring this year, we had a bigger group, so I was doing a Q&A from 12:30 until 4:30 every single Friday, the whole way through, because I was staying on until every single person's questions were answered. And it was a big class, so that meant I was on the Q&A for 4.5 hours every single week. With smaller classes, sometimes the Q&A is like hour and a half. So it really just depends how many people are enrolled. At the bare minimum, even if you can't attend the Q&As live, I would absolutely encourage you to watch the replay of them And I usually get those uploaded the same day or definitely by the next morning. And you could just rewatch those if you would like to do so. Let's see. What if you miss a week of the course? Can it be made up later? Deb asks. Yes. Yep. So like I said, you can watch it in a number of different ways. But if you're on vacation and you're just like, nope, I don't want to learn about IBS, Dr. DiNezza, I'm in Europe for 2 weeks and I'm gonna go, I don't know, like sail the French Riviera or whatever it might be that you're doing. That's fine. Go do that. It'll be great for your vagus nerve. You can circle back to us when you come back. I have had people who go on vacation and then they come back and then they're like, okay, now I'll play catch up a little bit and I'll watch a little bit more of the lecture material, and then you rejoin the Q&As when you're able to attend. So yep, that's totally fine. Yoshi asks, do you have unlimited access to the course after it's all done? Yes, absolutely you do. That is a pet peeve of mine, when you buy a course and then for no apparent reason they make it expire at a certain time. I hate that. I will add too, though, there's a lot that I'm always adding to FODMAP Freedom as my understanding of the microbiome and my understanding of the gut grows and improves. And as new research comes out, I'm always either adding to FODMAP Freedom or sprucing it up or re-recording some of the lectures. And I really like to make new bonuses. So the most recent one that I did this with was Banish the Burn. Banish the Burn is my GERD and gastritis class. I don't have it available any other way other than with the FODMAP Freedom suite of classes at this point. But I made that because I saw some students struggling to treat their SIBO when they also had gastritis or GERD, and I knew that they needed a separate class to tackle that. And when I made Banish the Burn, I went through and I made sure that every single one of my prior students from FODMAP Freedom got access to that course, even though I created it after they joined. So similarly, if you join FODMAP Freedom, I don't care if it's 5 years from now, 20 years from now, if I'm making new bonuses and new things and I'm throwing it into the mix with FODMAP Freedom, or if I'm making it bigger and better, you actually get access to that in addition to the version of the course that you took. So yes. Let's see. Morgan asks, do we get access to all of them at once, or are they doled out once a week? I don't have 12 weeks to wait for all this info, with a frowny face. Oh, this is another one. I want to hug all of you guys, like Morgan and Lisa, and I forget who else I said earlier too. I think Katie. Oh my goodness, guys. So yes, it is, you get one module per week. So it's about an hour worth of content each week. And then we talk about it in the Q&A together. And then you get the next module and you have a week to go over it. And then we do a Q&A together. The rhyme and reason for that is a couple-fold. A, I understand where a lot of you guys are at. Again, I was there myself. And I know that a lot of you guys are desperate to feel better ASAP. I get that. But there's only so much room in your brain to take in this information at a time. If you had access to all 12 modules and you went through and you hammered out like 6 or 8 or 12 of them all in one get-go, you wouldn't be able to really apply the information. It might feel like you got all the information you needed, but I guarantee that that's not how it would work out. So A, I want you to, this is my way of helping you resist the temptation to do all the course at once and then learn very, very little from it and be able to apply very, very little from it. The other thing too, the bigger reason is because I was in your shoes. I know darn well that a lot of you would skip over the first few modules because they wouldn't look sexy or important or applicable to you. And I laugh because I'm thinking of past Nikki. When my IBS was really, really bad, I was convinced for whatever reason that I had the world's worst case of leaky gut syndrome. End of story. That's it. That was my diagnosis. I knew it. And I got this information from like world-renowned functional medicine doctors. Like, why would I not believe that? And I know that if past Nikki got access to this course, I would have skipped over all the first half of the course and I would have gone straight for the leaky gut module. I would have hyper-focused on that. I would have taken all the supplements in the leaky gut module and I wouldn't have gotten better. Because, spoiler alert, now I know I had bigger fish to fry. I had a fried vagus nerve and I was super stressed and that was driving a lot of my issues. I also had dysbiosis, I had candida, I had bacterial overgrowth, I actually had some parasites. I had a lot of other stuff to work on beyond just the leaky gut conversation. But I know where I was at when I was unwell. I would have hyper-focused on leaky gut and I would not have gotten better. So similarly, I don't want you to come into FODMAP Freedom with pre-existing diagnoses or self-diagnoses or assumptions that make you hop around to the material and miss out on a lot of the really useful information that's actually going to help you heal. So that's the real reason why I do that, Morgan, is I don't want you guys to make the same mistake that I know damn well I would have done if I was in that position. Also, it really does open up more of a conversation in the Q&As. Like, if we all can talk about one topic in the Q&As, it makes it so much easier to digest the material when you're doing it together. So rather than if we had a weekly Q&A and one person's asking about hormones, the other person's asking about histamine, the other person's asking about microbiome, the other person's asking about biofilm, the next person's talking about vagus nerve stuff, that's total chaos. Versus, you know, if we are in the vagus nerve motility week, all of us come together and all of us have a conversation about the vagus nerve and motility. If we are in the week where we're talking about histamine and mast cells, we all come together and we all have a conversation about histamine and mast cells. So it also makes the Q&As a lot more impactful and helpful, I think. Let's see. Sarah asks, you mentioned that if it doesn't work, but we can show we did the work, you'll refund the money. How do we show we did the work? Yes, that's a good point. I should have mentioned earlier in the video. FODMAP Freedom has a 100% money back guarantee. I kid you not. I'm not in the business of making courses that get you nowhere and then you are bitter and hate me and you're frustrated and you're out a couple $1,000s. That's not the point of FODMAP Freedom. And I'm so confident that it's going to work that I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. So if you go through the program and you spend some time applying this information, right? Like, this is not necessarily going to be an overnight magical cure, but if you really work at it and you try to apply this information, the only thing I ask is that you meet with me and we talk about your experience going through FODMAP Freedom. Because I want to be a better teacher and I want to make a bigger, better, more impactful, more useful class for my future students. So if you were unsatisfied for whatever reason, or you feel like you didn't get results from FODMAP Freedom, just circle back to me. We're going to talk. I can get a sense for whether or not you did the work based on talking to you. If we can talk about the things that you tried and what you didn't try and what didn't work, and you can tell me what was good and what was kind of subpar and what I could have done better, I think that in and of itself would tell me quite a lot, and that would be like proof that you did the work. The other thing is that technology is very creepy and very sneaky, and I can actually see on the back end as a course creator, I can see which lectures you have watched and which ones you have not. So similarly, before we get into the conversation of issuing a refund, if I go into the back end on my portal and I see that you've only completed 40% of the lectures, I don't know, you can't really say it didn't work, right? Like, if you didn't go through the material, I don't know if you could really say it was ineffective for you. So that's the other way too, is that there's some objective and subjective ways that I can determine if you've actually tried to put the work in, or if you just like listen to one module and you're like, this doesn't work for me, I'm just going to wait for the refund. So hope that helped. Last question. This is also from a Sarah. I didn't write down last names though, so I don't remember if this is the same Sarah. We'll pretend it is. I'm one of those weirdos who doesn't have Facebook. I'm guessing that excludes me from the community. If I could convince my husband to let me use his, would that be allowed? First of all, yes, you're a weirdo for not having Facebook, but also good for you. I would have deleted Facebook if it wasn't for the fact that I need it for business purposes. I got way too hooked on it. It was like my crack, and I had to cut myself off cold turkey for a while there. So yes, right now, as of the recording of this video, the private community is hosted on Facebook. What you could do is, yes, you could use somebody else's, or I've had like dummy accounts that people have created where they only ever use it for FODMAP Freedom and nothing else. When you ask to join the online community, I ask for the email address that you used when you invested in FODMAP Freedom. So if it came in as John Doe instead of Jane Doe, but I see that the email matches up with the student in FODMAP Freedom, I'm generally going to put 2 and 2 together. And I actually have had people who have done that. Also, if you just like shoot me a quick email and give me a heads up that you're going to do that, that would also be a nice added bonus. But yes, that's totally fine. And you could even just omit the group. Not everybody uses the group. I like it. I think it's nice to just have some redundancy in the support. And, for people who are able to and want to attend the live Q&As, great, we have live Q&As. For people who just want to be in sponge mode and they just want to watch the Q&As after the fact, you have the recordings. For people who want to email in their questions or use the Facebook group for questions, that's fine too. It's really just like whatever floats your boat to a certain degree. I really like the Q&As because then we can all have a conversation and the students can help each other and you guys can kind of commiserate and talk about your shared experiences. In our last group, we had 3 people that we jokingly called the triplets. They were from different parts of the country, all over the place. I think California, Oregon, and Toronto, if I remember correctly. And the triplets had very similar stuff. All of them had histamine issues that they knew before even joining the course. All of them had like vertigo or dizziness or POTS type symptoms. All of them had acid reflux or gastritis. All of them had been diagnosed with SIBO. So there was like funny little things that would come out of the conversations with the 3 of them when they were attending the Q&As, because they would share similar experiences, or they would say like, oh, if that worked for you, then maybe you should think of such and such because it helped me. So that's also a nice little added bonus. You're probably going to find at least one buddy who has somewhat similar symptoms to you when you go to the live Q&As. But like I said, nothing is truly mandatory in FODMAP Freedom. It really is about what makes your journey the fastest and the most enjoyable. And I'm there to support you, and my FODMAP Freedom coaches are there to support you in whatever way we can. But like I said, to that end, that was my last question that I had for you guys. If you have questions, again, there's a link down below. Scroll to the bottom of that page and you'll see a link where you can book a call with a FODMAP Freedom coach, and then you can talk to her about any questions that you might have that I wasn't able to answer in this video. And you can always drop a comment down below, and I will make a point of watching out for the comments this week until the doors close. Because again, if you're on the fence and you think you might want to join, I want to make sure we get to your questions sooner rather than later so you can make a decision and you can join in on the fun, and you could make this the year that you finally conquer your gut problems and you could just eat and live like a normal human being and not stress about this stuff. But again, we're going to close the doors Friday at midnight. It is what it is. We go through this as a group. We go through week by week together, and we have the Q&As designed that way. So that's why I don't do rolling enrollment. You've got to join now if you want to get in FODMAP Freedom. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait until the next enrollment period begins. But I hope that this was insightful and maybe a little bit amusing, and I hope this provided clarity that you needed when you're making your decision of whether or not FODMAP Freedom is the right step in your healing journey.